1996. Some of the phosphorus is coming from Lake Huron, some of it is coming from point sources. A whole lot appear to be coming from these non-point sources in 1996. And then in the atmosphere, appear to be the most minor contribution of phosphorus to the Erie. So those numbers basically came from the point source, our non-point source, our atmospheric source, and Lake Huron. Then for 2002, I just put those. Not gold blue. Yeah, the curse continues.
I'll give you my bank account number.
All right. I'll underline for 2002. So again, each of those values pull away from the 2002 data. Points, non-points. Spirit. Huron. So it's just taking data from the data source and matching it up with our model of product. So we can see that phosphorus is entering Lake Erie on an annual basis. One more piece we'll sort of return to. This bottom value, which we didn't do anything with, is called the GLWQA target. Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement target. And so each year they're trying to limit the amount of phosphorus going into the lake to 11,000 units. And so what we can do is basically add across all these different sources. So in 1996, we had a target of 11,000. We were at 11,584 actual inputs. So a little over. But by 2002, same target, but look at that, down at 9,733. Okay, so progress. We see that progress, effectively by 1999, we were consistently below the target input rate. Okay, so efforts at pollution abatement, pollution control ended up being pretty darn effective in limiting the amount of phosphorus flowing into lakes. Into Lake Erie. Okay, so in the 1960s and 1970s, Lake Erie experienced these major outbreaks of algae blooms. And at the time, on late night TV, back in the era of Johnny Carson, where the late night host said, Lake Erie is where fish go to die, which got lots of laughs and lots of tears after that. But Lake Erie really has been a case study in ecosystem recovery, because what we saw in the 60s and 70s, basically in the 80s or 90s and early 2000s, had completely gone away. So if we look at phosphorus trends for Lake Erie going back to the 1960s or 1965, there's two trends we can pull out of this data on phosphorus loading, or the amount of phosphorus going to Lake Erie. So what are those two trends we can see from this graph? Give me one trend.
1965 to 1990, there was a somewhat uneven, but definitely downward slope of amount of phosphorus loaded into the lake.
So it looks like from 1965 to about 1990, Since 1989, ignore that little blip for just a minute, the amount of phosphorus dropped from 25 gigagrams down to about 5 gigagrams, so about an 80% reduction on an annual basis of phosphorus going into the year. Which is a big deal. It's a pretty major reduction in nutrient load. What's another trend we can pull out? That's a great question. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be? Your last guess was really good.
I don't know, it's phosphorus, yeah, so maybe there's just an inconsistent input of phosphorus. I wanna say word of life.
Well, look at your diagram we just drew. You know, what was sort of the major source of phosphorus loading in the Lake Erie? Non-point, right? And, you know, what does non-point sources include? Wasn't it?
I don't know, I guess just industry, like, I don't know, that's kind of vague, I know.
Yeah, industry's gonna be a point source, because if you have a factory that is emitting phosphorus, that's considered a point source. A non-point source is going to be a particular farmer's field where there's no pipe coming off that field delivering phosphorus to a local stream. Basically have runoff and sediment going into the stream, or water moving through the soil into the groundwater and into the stream, each one delivering just a little bit of phosphorus, right? So that you can't really point and say that's where the phosphorus is coming from, because it's so diffuse across the landscape. Do you rent? Do you own a house? Your parents own a house? All right. Your landscape, or your where you rent, you know, there's probably some shrubs or some trees outside. Maybe if there's any attention put into the landscaping, there's fertilization of a grassy area done in the spring. The phosphorus from that fertilizer makes its way into the groundwater during heavy rain events, washes into the watershed. While ours doesn't go to Lake Erie, it ends up going out into the Ohio River and then the Mississippi and then the Gulf of Mexico. That's a non-point source of pollution. All right. There's a question over here, or yeah.
What has something to do with crop rotation?
It could have something to do with crop rotation. Do you have any thoughts on crop rotation specifically?
Nothing specific. I just know that Ohio is doing between corn, and soybeans, so that has something to do with that. Yeah.
Thoughts on?
So if it had something to do with crop rotation, the amount of phosphorus in the soil will be lower following a year they plant corn, and then it will be higher following a year they plant soybeans. The soybeans have nitrogen bacteria.
Right, so the soybeans are a nitrogen-producing crop, and so they typically require less fertilization. A lot of times you can get away with no fertilization of soybeans. The next year you put on corn. Corn's a lot more fertilizer intensive, so when you rotate crops back and forth between fertilizer or between soybeans and corn, you get sort of these bursts of fertilizer in some years, but not others.
Now, was there a lot of advocacy to lower the use of fertilizer back in the '60s? Now,
There was
is this Silent Springs?
that wasn't fertilizer. That was pesticides.
Well, the environmental parts.
But associated with the environmental movement, there was an effort for using fertilizers more efficiently, so that rather than broadcast fertilizer all over, you know, the argument is, it's like, well, you know, farmers are always working at really narrow margins in terms of between profit and loss. If you can show them ways to save money, you say, hey, look, you know, 10 pounds of fertilizer per acre is giving you the same bang as 30 pounds. It's not giving you more yield. If you go with less, it's going to benefit you economically. It's going to benefit the streams. It's an easy sell. Yeah. There's another question back here. I thought, or a hand. I get easily distracted. that easily, so. Alright. So we do have this this variation year to year, which could be due to crop rotation. But we're gonna see another potential way that sort of brings together fertilization and year-to-year variation, and sort of phosphorus load into water systems. Alright. So we did get one trend. The second trend we got was sort of year-to-year variability. The third trend was basically after 1990. It appeared that the phosphorus loading is more or less stabilized, so we sort of dropped down to a level and stayed at that level. But what ended up happening was by 2011, these algae blooms basically began returning to Lake Erie. And I know this is hard to see if you don't have it on your computer screen in front of you, but we've got 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And this is a map of the western Lake Erie Basin. So we've got Toledo down here. And what we're seeing is these sort of these rainbow-like colors are showing the productivity of algae in Lake Erie. So the more, as we go from sort of the purples and blues, which indicates relatively low productivity of algae, to the oranges and reds, which indicates very high productivity. We can see, it sort of varies a little bit year to year. 2004 was kind of, seemed to be a rather kind of bad year. Things cleared up in 2005. Things were relatively clear in 2006, 2007. Something weird happened in 2008. Stayed weird in 2009. Stayed weird in 2010, and it seemed to get a lot worse and a lot more widespread by 2011. So what's going on here? What's going on here is actually contained within this particular graph from 2011. Let me give you just a little bit of orientation to this, this graph. Again, we have one of those double y-axes, or double response axes. So we have over here something called daily discharge in cubic meters per second. So this is a measure of the amount of water moving through a river, basically from January 1st to June 30th, approximately. And then over here, we have something called, on this red axis, the cumulative load of phosphorus. The red data is going to indicate phosphorus loading. The blue data is going to indicate water movement. So who knows what the Maumee and the Sandusky are?
Maumee, Toledo, and Sandusky is like halfway from Toledo to Cleveland.
But what are they?
Cities.
They're cities, but they're also something else. They're rivers. Not wrong. So what we have then is we have information about how much water is moving through those two rivers, and information about how much phosphorus is being delivered by each of those rivers through time. So let's start off with the Maumee River. So the blue is going to indicate the volume of water in the river, and the red line is going to indicate the cumulative phosphorus delivery of that. So focusing on just on the solid lines, the solid blue and the solid red line. What do you think's going on here?
Looks like there's more water. Is it coming in?
It's flowing into Lake Erie.
But the phosphorus why is it increasing this one in the Lake Erie?
Why is it increasing at this point? You had your hand up.
Yeah, you have these spikes of discharge from the rivers, and when those, discharge are highest, it correlates to those cumulative, peaks of phosphorus increasing as well.
Alright.
So more water flowing through, the more phosphorus is flowing.
So what causes more water to suddenly be flowing through a river?
Increased weather to rock, big source.
It's not increased rock weathering.
Precipitation.
Right? It's raining, so when you end up getting very severe storms, that water ends up flowing across farm fields. It flows through cities, flows through your apartment complexes where the shrubs and whatnot, the grass has been fertilized. And all that phosphorus that went near the surface from fertilizer is getting washed into the watershed. And so there was a major storm event February 17th, and you can see the spike here. All that rain comes on the land, it moves into the river. You get a second spike happening over here with more volume of water going through. And they sort of settle down, you get your normal rainstorms, you get another big rain here and another big rain here. Each time you get one of those major storms, you're delivering 2 or 3 inches of rain, that water makes its way into the rivers, and as it makes its way to the rivers, it's bringing some of the phosphorus with it. And that's why you're seeing sort of these jumps in phosphorus associated with those precipitation events. So that's what's happening with the Maumee. Now we can look at the Sandusky River, which is in the dashed lines. A little bit harder to see, but we've got, again, sort of the blue indicates the discharge, the red indicates the cumulative phosphorus flow. So what's happening with the Sandusky? Do we see the same general trends?
Much smaller scale.
Yeah, so there's a much smaller, it's sort of the same general pattern, but at a much smaller level. So that, we have a sort of big discharge in the Maumee. Around the same time, we have a jump in the discharge of the Sandusky, but only about half to, maybe 40% of the volume that was flowing through the Maumee River. Okay, it drops back down around the same time. And then during this storm event in the Maumee, we have this much smaller jump in the volume of the Sandusky, and then another small jump over here compared to this massive jump in the Maumee. And so the amount of phosphorus moving through the Sandusky system sort of also follows these same jumps, but it doesn't jump nearly as high, but it's sort of moving up around the same period. So it's a linkage between hydrology and storm cycles. That rain moving across the land, sweeping up phosphorus where it's available, moving it into the rivers, and then ultimately delivering it up into Lake Erie. So single heavy rainfall events end up being very significant for the global phosphorus cycle, especially as they relate to phosphorus flowing in bodies of water, especially lakes. Questions on phosphorus? We've done with phosphorus. Let's go back to the nitrogen cycle. As our table indicated, we know that the phosphorus cycle is being tweaked by anthropogenic activity. The nitrogen cycle is being